So hi everyone, can I get your guys' attention? So this site out here you can see on the floodplain, LCFEG has been working for over a decade now, putting in structures, doing riparian work, planting out here. You can see two types of structures. Some of the larger logs out there where we were put in.
Oh, you're fine.
I think in 2011 we started. So they've really kind of interacted with the floodplain. You can see a lot more growth here. Previously this was lahar, just gravel. So a lot of the growth that's come up, they've, varying success. We've learned a lot since some of these. So some of them I'm not going to stand behind and say like they're best structures, but they were the best we could do at the time. And then there's some little structures down right here that were built a year and a half ago for our training. So if you can walk over here, you can look down and see those once we're done. And those are kind of unique, smaller structures that Colin can speak to. Do you want to kind of explain the purpose of those? And
sure.
Yeah.
So back in 2011, there was a chap called Tony Myers, who was a kind of influencer of the day and really pushed the envelope. And so he built some very large wood structures, which at the time were extremely unusual. They are structures as you wouldn't build anymore because they're bolted together. They've got chains to keep all the pieces of wood together because at the time there was such an adverse reaction to putting large wood into a river because people were worried it would wind up rammed under a bridge or in their water intake, and that would be a piece of wood that somebody had put there and therefore they're liable for it. So these ones were made absolutely sure they wouldn't go anywhere. There's even big steel piles put through some of them, and we wouldn't use that heavy metal anymore. We've got ways now of wedging wood and using more natural materials. But nonetheless, just as Morgan said, nonetheless, they have worked. What you were standing on was shifting braid plane, continually reworked. No chance for vegetation to take a foothold because everything moved around so often. Those big wood structures created shadow zones, recirculating zones where finer material accrued, plant propagules, seeds came in, and then lots of planting with very effective citizen involvement and community engagement. And if you get the community behind you, your project will succeed. And if you don't, it will fail, basically. So this has been a great fusion of the park together with bringing nature back in and giving vegetation the chance to reclaim some of the area that was destroyed by the lahar. What we did last year was we held a beaver conference up at the Eco Park. We had several of the world leading beaver experts here, and they wanted the students to get splinters in their fingers, dirt under their fingernails, and actually build some wood structures. Now you can't build big structures like those in an afternoon, but you can build what are called PALSs, post-assisted log structures, and you build them by hand. And you can build beaver dam analogs, and you build them by hand, and it takes maybe an hour to build one, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. What we were experimenting was, given that we've got a few very big structures here, can we start putting smaller structures between them that give you that finer granularity in the diversity of habitats, of depths and velocities and grain sizes? Can we embroider on this proto-floodplain, and again, not try and do nature's work for it, but try and fast forward a bit through the early days of developing that patchy mosaic that is the signature of a really mature floodplain. These structures are not intended to be permanent. They're the absolute other end of the spectrum from Tony Myers, which he wanted to stay here for a long time.
And they have.
And they have. These structures have much shorter useful lives. They're intended to kickstart natural processes, not drive natural processes. And so I'm not even sure how much of them will still be here, because they only usually last like 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, the piles stay, and then all the material that was put in between kind of can
Well, it tends to. I mean, you hope that the piles then collect volunteer material that's coming down the stream naturally. Although, of course, this river is wood deficient, because all of the wood that should have come into the stream system after the eruption got salvaged. So it's short of wood. Yeah.
It might be useful if you would explain what the 2010 Two Forks confluence looked like, where it was versus where it is now.
Well, yeah, that's a really good point. Again, if you get onto Google Earth and go onto the bar where you can go back through the satellite images, you can see this for yourself. The whole confluence moved around a lot. And I don't know the details of it, but maybe you do. But certainly, again, it wasn't just that one stream was sweeping around and reworking the break plain. You had two streams coming together, making life very difficult for the vegetation to get a hold. Yeah. And you know, looking at what's happened, the stream used to be over here, the main stream, and now it's way over there. I'm not entirely sure I'd credit that to the wood structures. I don't think they like scared the river away. But on the other hand, maybe it's not coincidence. Maybe this winning of the floodplain here has resulted in the channels taking more different courses.
Yeah, and you'll see that more vividly at the project further up, where the river is still moving around the floodplain in what we call like a lawnmower effect. I think I want to credit Nick with that here. Where it kind of is just blasting all the riparian that's trying to establish when it shifts. And then so nothing can get established in the lahar because there's no material coming down. It creates this like negative feedback loop. And so projects like this try to intercept that and shift it towards more natural processes.
Yeah, that don't fix the river in place, but just calm it down a little bit so that the processes are more orderly, more organized, and less random.
And then also while we're here, I want to highlight the riparian planting that we've done here has been in no small part done by our Seeds to Salmon program. That's a program where we go into local high schools, including we got Toutle High School down the road, bringing the kids out to do planting here. So a lot of the trees here, not all of them, a lot of the trees here you see were collected, the seeds were collected by students, grown by students in local high schools with the education program that Emily runs here.
Yes.
They had curriculum that taught about the importance of the riparian, the intersection with salmon, all of that work, and then they came out, we do like an Earth Day event, and planted them out here. And that's been going on for a couple of years. So you can see there's a lot of plants that we walked by. That extends far down on the floodplain. It's really cool, synergy program that brings in our conservation work and our education work.
Right.
Yeah, and just want to mention that.
Yeah. So we should go look at them as well.
Do we have time to walk down?
Well, at least to one of the big wood structures. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can walk down. We go down this way, and there's one right here.
Fish and Wildlife Service says it's not about success in planting; it's about succession. And so maybe half the plants they planted died because they weren't the right plants or it wasn't the right place. But you don't know.
We get landowner approval and permission to do work. And then we kind of look at the floodplain and where we would have the most impact, engaging the most floodplain. So there's a large section of the South Fork that's kind of channelized. So that was like, okay, not worth working there right away. So we kind of went from here up where there is a wider floodplain that we can engage. And then we're going to stop a little bit further from where we're going to go and jump to the headwaters and start doing work up there. Because there is more floodplain to engage up there. There's also a limiting factor of for Chinook habitat in this watershed, so increasing the amount of habitat available to them, because right now they can't get to that upper reaches, or the quality of habitat's not great up there. I know there's people here that know way more about this than me, so I'm trying to be careful with my words. But providing that good cold water refugia for returning Chinook is super important, is my understanding. So we're jumping up there with some of our bigger projects, and we'll be completing those next and kind of working down.
And who is working on, are there any other projects, efforts, organizations working at the scale that you are in terms of the amount of stream you're trying to treat and the number of structures you're trying to put in?
WDFW has done some things on the North Fork.
I'm thinking more outside of Washington.
Outside of Washington? These type of restoration work are happening all over the country. We're definitely doing some of the larger ones in the country though, which is fun. Yeah. It's kind of working in a unique way. It's not obviously intuitive. Welcome to the Brownell Reach of the South Fork Toutle. This is a project that we put in this summer. You can see stretching out this way. I guess the first thing to note here is the scale. If you saw the structure at Harry Gardner Park compared to this one, we have two members of our team out there right now, Jesse and Matt, wrapping up construction. And honestly, I can't see them out there. I know they're there because their truck's right across the river, but they're somewhere out there. And they're even wearing high vis, and I can't spot them. I think a really cool aspect of this project, just to kind of highlight, that structure right in the center there is a island forming, island forming log jam. It's about 160 feet wide. It is has a root wad in the front of it that's about 16 feet by 16 feet, and has I don't know how many tons of ballast boulders placed in there to hold it in place. But it is one of the largest log jams I've ever seen constructed. And the goal of that is to establish this split in the river and to enable riparian growth behind it. So this project is, part of our big sequencing of South Fork restoration. We'll be going from here to one a little further down that we built in 2017, and that will kind of show how these projects work. But this is just a massive scale, massive project that will really kind of transform this river. I'm gonna throw here to Steve. Where are you, Steve?
Sorry.
Yeah. Director at LCFEG. I've been here for like 5 months. So I'm not comfortable speaking to the fish portion of this. If you could give us a little talk about how this is going to impact the Toutle watershed salmon recovery efforts. Yeah, hop up.
So good morning. I'm Steve West with the Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board. Morgan had asked me to provide a little bit of context. I will keep it under 3 minutes.
A little bit louder.
So Steve West with the Fish Recovery Board. We were established in 1998 by the legislature after the various listings. Enough about us. But the important thing is we helped facilitate the salmon recovery plan in Lower Columbia. That goes from Pacific County on out to Skamania County, up into Lewis County, and certainly includes this. We typically, or not typically, but we focus on the 4-H's, which have grown since then. Habitat, hydro, harvest, and hatchery. Now there's also ecological interactions, et cetera, et cetera. We're a big region, 5,700 square miles, 2,200 stream miles. We encompass 3 strata: the coast, which is the Grays, et cetera, the Cascade, which includes the Toutle, and the Gorge, which includes the Wind River and others. We have 16 subbasins, and then the Columbia River with 72 individual populations. The Toutle River, South Fork, North Fork, have 7 different populations, with chum salmon kind of being an aggregate of the lower lower Cowlitz, and chum go up at least to the confluence. When these fish were listed, almost all of them had very low viability ratings. We need to get them higher. So right now we're struggling a little bit with fall Chinook, spring Chinook. They're remaining very low. The good news is for South Fork steelhead, we're almost at delisting goal. There's a lot more to that scenario because we need to get multiple populations up. And we need to have an average rating of medium across the board. And we're also doing really well in coho. South Fork, this is what we really need. So the Habitat H, this is what these guys are working really well on. It's also worth noting that within the subbasin plan, the Toutle subbasin plan, we have key priorities. The number one is, and I think we're going to see this in a little bit over on the North Fork, is address fish passage on the North Fork at the SRS. The other one is manage forest lands. We make the assumption that forested fish rules are pretty good, with established buffers, etc., and definite road maintenance requirements. And then lastly, restoring valley floodplain, riparian function, and stream habitat diversity. So that's what you're seeing out here. We're making progress. That's the important thing. So we still have a lot of work to do. I know Chinook are generally in here as well, but it's further down where the pinch points are.
Question. So when did this actually start? How long has it been going? And if you got what you thought you needed to get done physically, when might the end of this project be deemed a full success? How many years or decades?
So this project or salmon recovery?
Well, maybe this project and then the bigger picture.
So this project started. It's not like one project. It's a series of phase projects that have started and stopped over since 2011. We first started putting wood in this channel, and I can speak a little bit to what Steve talked about here. We have finished this project. We have a little bit more to do up to that bridge structure over there to finish off this lower area, and then we're jumping to the headwaters to do two projects that one has been funded, one will hopefully be funded shortly. Seen some lists that look good. That gets us really, really far in the headwaters, and the reason we're doing that primarily is the Chinook habitat up there to help establish that. With those projects, and some other funding coming in, our goal is to complete the work we really want to do on the South Fork by 2035. Yeah, that's kind of the mission we've talked about internally. We're starting to put that on some literature. I think I have that on the handout. So that's kind of be our kind of goal to complete this section. And with these projects, reaching maturity, the ones that we'll show you down there have really started to impact the floodplain and shown what they do, but we're not going to stop working then. So in 2 weeks, we're going to start planting down there, project that we built in 2017.
Morgan, do you have a visual timeline of how the structures have evolved since you started building them?
Well, we're going to try to show you some ones and how they've interacted. They all work differently. Yeah. There's probably 5 to 7 different types of structures out there. It's not a uniformed log jam. There's sweeper logs, there's island forming log jams, there's these structures on the side that all try to interact with the hydrology a little differently. And we have our geomorphologist here who's going to speak to that in a little bit. But one point I want to make with these is the South Fork's kind of been our testing bed. Proof of concept. We're not stopping with the South Fork. We have a major design project on the green that's going to kind of inform how we transfer this nature-based restoration process to the Green River. We started here, important to say for obvious reasons, there's no dam, there's no hatchery. It's the clearest place to start. It's the best uplift potential. But as we move further on, we're looking towards the green, we're looking towards the North Fork to do similar projects, big main stem projects that have amazing co-benefits, but then also tackle some of these key issues with habitat loss in the watershed. And with that, I kind of want to throw it over to Nick, who's going to talk a little bit about how these structures work, why we do them here, what's unique about the Lahar and this reach that kind of brought us to build these, because we didn't just pick this because it's cool. It is cool, but there's a reason we came here and started doing this work. You want to go?
Yeah, sweet. Hey everyone, I'm Nick. I'm a geomorphologist. I've been working with LCFEG for the last 5 years, and I'd say through that time we've really sort of evolved our restoration approach in this valley from, like Colin alluded to, what Tony was building, to projects like this, and then even in the headwaters we're taking slightly different approaches. So if you looked at this valley, this overview 2 months ago, there would have been no wood, right? And so clearly wood is a key part of our approach, but also there's pretty young and limited vegetation. And in order to have, we're thinking about this as a system, right? And so to have natural supply of wood in this stream, this river, we need trees growing. And so those two together are really fundamental to our approach. We need to grow trees, but what's limiting the growth of trees in this valley? One, we need to get the trees to germinate, and the other is we need to limit that lawnmower effect where the river is moving back and forth so dynamically that even if the trees grow, they get wiped out. So we've kind of thought through that process, and the way these wood structures are laid out and designed is to address that. So first, to get the trees to grow, to germinate, we need water because this is really sandy, ashy soil. So it drains in the dry summers. And so we need to get the water up to the floodplain to get the plants to germinate. And the way we're doing that is by plugging the channels with a lot of wood. In some cases, we're actually pushing sediment into the channels to bring water tables up and water levels up. That helps the plants to grow. And then the wood itself provides the structure so that we're calming down the system and avoiding that lawnmower effect to the same degree that's happening. So when the trees grow, they persist to some degree. So some very specific things we've done to achieve those goals. We see that island forming jam. Morgan said it's a huge jam, which it is, but a unique feature of it compared to some of the earlier generations is it's very low. It's low to the river, so the plants have access to the water table, and we can grow trees behind those logs to effectively self-stabilize and build that island through time. You'll notice a lot of this wood is very low. It's plugging the channel. LCFEG's been really creative also about how do we get the trees to grow. And then they've developed these riparian plant pods, which I think are a really neat thing. You know, you're out here with heavy equipment, and these plant pods are what big bags, burlap sacks of native soil and plantings that they take a big bucket, install it deep into the soil, and it gives us that head start, a clump of vegetation that can grow and expand in concert with more water availability that's provided by the wood and the broader restoration approaches. The last thing I'll touch on are the co-benefits. I know we're all interested in sediment. The good thing about getting wood, reconnecting the floodplains, growing trees, is that all provides the structure to retain sediment. And we know there's a ton of sand moving through the system. We've done some work in the headwaters to assess just the amount of sediment we can capture with these types of approaches. And it's I forget the numbers, but 400,000 cubic yards with one project. Now we know that that's a bit of a drop in the bucket, but it ends up being cheaper than dredging in a lot of cases based on our preliminary calculations. And so by keeping the sediment in the headwaters where we can, while also benefiting the fish, it's a great opportunity to do good projects and provide holistic benefits to this community and watershed. Yeah, I'm done.
Just, okay,
I'm
Kurt just
open to
reminded
questions.
me, there was a sediment dam right here.
Yep, I forgot to say that.
And the fish were coming up and beating their heads at the bottom of it, and some people that will remain unnamed managed to fix that problem on their own.
Yeah, this area has a huge history, and I think an extremely unique watershed with the Lahar. It operates kind of like one of those, river tables where you can kind of plug things up and chase it around. It's extremely dynamic and very unique in that respect. And we're super excited to get an opportunity to do these projects here. Just to build on what you said about co-benefits, sediment's kind of the buzzword for the collaborative, right? And keeping the sediment at the higher watershed is incredibly important for habitat. And it benefits downstream, it benefits the port. You guys don't have to dredge it. It benefits the communities that don't have to raise levees, reduces the flood risk downstream. We also hold water with these projects. So these engage what's called the hyporheic flow. That flow that connects to the water, it's groundwater but not really groundwater. The river's kind of flowing through that prism, and these slow the river down, spread it out, engage the hyporheic flow so that it stays in the headwaters longer, stays cooler. That's great for salmon, that's why we do it, but it also benefits downstream communities, reduces flooding risk. It keeps the water, keeps it slower, keeps it calmer, means that you don't have to do as much work down in Longview to prevent that flooding when you get like high rains up here. It'll stay here for a little bit. Yeah,
I'm curious about the kind of the lifespan of projects like this. Once that 400,000 cubic yards of sediment is retained, then kind of what's that next step? Does it just kind of top over, or like is there a risk of things washing out? Can you talk a little bit more about like once that capacity is reached, then what are the next steps?
The way I like to think of it is by growing forests, connecting floodplains, building that natural structure, we're building distributed sediment retention structures. That if we can get the trees to grow and mature, that's the sort of stability that holds that sediment there long term. Certainly, I think these floodplains have a capacity. We can't raise the river indefinitely, but the hope is to get the trees and that natural structure there. And so when we grow trees, we solve a lot of issues, and so we're really focused on that piece.
You and Morgan as well have been talking a lot about the sediment retention as a co-benefit. If sediment retention were to become more of a primary design criteria, would you do things differently, or you would do it the same with an equal benefit?
That's a good question. I think we're really focused on working with the river in whatever we do with these projects. So, when we want to build salmon habitat, we want it to be persistent with the situation, and we would want to do the same with sediment retention. And so since we're taking this approach of connecting floodplains, raising water surfaces, I don't think we would do that much differently if we were just focused on sediment. There might be different opinions there, but I feel like we have this approach that's pretty holistic of raising the stream, retaining, connecting.
It is the situation you've got too.
Yeah.
A lot of sediment there.
There's plenty of sediment. It's just about taking advantage of the space. Yeah.
So how is the future activities of the Army Corps with the spillway, is that going to impact any of this work in the next few years?
That'll be on the North Fork.
Okay.
So it does impact some of the work we're doing on the North Fork. You'll see it at Eco Lodge. We just did a barrier removal. Collins is going to do some work down below that. That is going to be, right up there at the cusp of what's being impacted by that raise. And then the work that the WDFW has done on the main stem, that'll be impacted by the raise.
Yeah.
raising that is the stupidest one.
Well,
It'll completely wipe out everything you guys have done in one whole.
yeah, it'll be close.
Yeah, you know, so they spend millions of dollars, and then instead of solving the problem, they just make a bigger problem.
Well, you can talk to the Army Corps about that the next stop. That's not me for me to say.
Oh, I know.
We had a question over here.
You said you wanted to finish by 2035.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific objectives? Like, like slightly smaller than that?
So we're funded limited. So we don't have a blank check to do these projects. We have to go out and scrap for funding every single time. We have been fortunate in the last couple of years that a new grant program has opened up at the state for targeted investment, and we compete statewide for that. We've funded a large portion of that with Steelhead 1. You'll see on the handout I gave you. And then Steelhead 2 is above the funding line, and some preliminary will probably get funded. That gets us very far down the line in terms of getting the headwater work we need done. And then after that, we're going to have to go out and compete again for the next projects. But we're ramping up our organization, our relationships with contractors, and our design team. We've kind of bridged this new design process that our project manager has kind of figured out how to do these, which is design a large reach, keep tons of flexibility in there, and then field fit a lot of this work. So, it's a target. You throw that target out there. There's a lot of things that could happen that means we could finish sooner. There's things that could happen that could delay us. And I think one of the big things in this group, speaking of being able to reach that target, on the ballot in November is the Climate Commitment Act. That funds that targeted investment program. That's funding Steelhead 1, and hopefully we'll fund Steelhead 2. But if it's voted down in November, Steelhead 2, that's gone, or we'll have to try to get funding elsewhere. So, yeah, that
so you
program.
mean if the initiative passes to repeal the Climate Commitment Act?
Yeah, it needs to not pass. It's one of those ballot measures that's worded kind of counterintuitively. It's a ballot measure to repeal the law that funds a lot of habitat work for us, including a lot of the work you're seeing here. So that's a big one that could push back that timeline. But if everything goes according to plan, and we keep getting these great grants, and we keep being able to do this work, 2035 is very reasonable.
But building in these co-benefits, I think, that adds funding resilience in a lot of ways, because salmon dollars do go up and down. So like the sediment pieces, like we have a really great opportunity here to work from multiple angles.
And a lot of these projects are going in places where there's a lot of river use that compete. That's not the case here. And the benefits we're providing downstream aren't, negatively impacting boaters' rights or navigation issues or other issues that people have in other watersheds. We're pretty much able to design the project we want to, focus on what the river needs and implement that without a lot of compromise. Any other questions? You can walk out on the floodplains here. You can check out some of the structures you've seen. Nick's here, Brian's here, a bunch of people here, Colin's here, who can speak to how these structures have worked and evolved over time. Feel free to grab us, just check things out, look at the riparian response. Basically, just so we can walk out there and look at some of the work we've done.
Little history before you notice the place with the culverts up the road about a quarter mile. That was a 12-mile logging camp. The logging camp was right up the road where those culverts were, and the railroad came right through here.
Yeah.
The logging railroad was 12 miles.
Let's go check it out.
you here is when the SRS was initially built in response to keeping the sediment upstream of the Cowlitz River after the Mountain Hills eruption. The idea was, this is the outlet works. This is where I'm starting here. Is the outlet works is when the water started rising. It had about, I think about eight levels of pipes. So the idea was the water would flow through the outlet works and downstream, but it would sediment up behind it. So each level would be sediment in. So it would be going to the next level. If I'm not mistaken, it was about in the early 2000s. It started going over the crest. So before that, all the water was only going through here, and that's the outlet works. And right now, the outlet works are full, so it's designed to do that. Now it's going over the crest raise. This is why what you hear is this is where the outlet works, and this is what this is.
What's the timeline for construction of that initial stage? Do you know the years, like 85 to 90?
Oh, you mean the initial SRS?
Yeah.
It was in the late 80s.
Okay.
87, 89. Yeah.
So that was in response to the Mountain Hills eruption, and then the authorization of the project by Congress, and then the construction. So yeah, and then also in that same time frame, as a mitigation effort, we constructed a fish collection facility. It's essentially it was a capture and haul to take adult fish there and then transport them above the SRS into certain fish release sites above the SRS. That's a quick summary. Question?
So are there plans to raise the height of this?
Of the crest, yes. Of the SRS itself, no. Because essentially when this was initially built, one of the ideas was maybe we'd have to raise the actual SRS, but right now there is absolutely no plan to raise where we're standing on now. But the crest, yes.
10 feet is the next raise?
The LRR, the limited reevaluation reports, which we authorized in 2018 to take us to essentially 2035. And I want to say something about the 2035 date. It is not when the authorization expires. The Corps of Engineers, they have a 50-year planning horizon, and the original report was authorized in 1985. That's where the 2035 comes in, because Corps really, because you're not going to plan 50 years out, more than 50 years out. So what we're going to have to do is kind of reevaluate the conditions report from 2035 to see what do we need to do, say from 2035 to 2085. And that when that process starts, and depending on funding, it should start in a couple of years. There'll be big public involvement in that process of what we want to do from 2035 on. Right now, the authorization is 2 more crest raises, and then
each of which are 10 feet. Do we know?
It's up to 13 feet, but until 23 feet, it could be 10, 13, yeah. But that's kind of like the authorization plan right now, and that's what's been authorized, and that's what the plan is. Then after that, after two increases, then the next option was grade building structures. Part of the authorization plan is if like there's a huge, like if we have an atmospheric river or there's a huge landslide and a lot of sediment gets pushed downstream into the Cowlitz where there's a flood risk. Part of that plan is emergency dredging too, but that is absolutely the last resort to maintain the level of protection and the flood risk downstream in Castle Rock, Kelso, and Lexington.
So what is the relationship between that planning horizon and those plans and the plans for the Spirit Lake Tunnel outlet, which is also having some challenges or issues, and that water would all come here?
Since you raised the issue of the Spirit Lake, and this is where the Corps comes in. Yes, I understand the Forest Service doing the analysis or whatever, but essentially anything that impacts the operational efficiency or operational impacts on the SRS,
Corps will have to evaluate what that environmental plan is, and essentially, because we have what we call a 4A process, if any plan adversely affects the operation of the SRS or flood risk, the Corps will say, no, you can't do that. But I'm not gonna, what I'm just saying is, we have to consult. We have a voice at the table of which plan will be, it all depends on evaluating the effects on the existing federal structures
I
down
guess I was not just asking policy-wise, if the tunnel or something would fail, or the sediment structures across South Coldwater and Castle Lake were to fail, wouldn't they all?
That would be one of the major events, and essentially sediment would all flow over the crust graves and down the stream, and that would be probably a trigger for an emergency dredge, because it would really settle down the low College River. That's what would happen there if something like that could happen. That's an emergency thing.
Okay.
You sound like you wanted to ask a question, sir.
Well, you raised this damn thing. It's gonna wipe out years of work out here. Why don't the Corps and the other government officials get off their ass and figure out something that's actually going to work, like dredging out behind it? This filled up, what, 25 years earlier than they estimated when they first built it? So far, when this dam was built, the Corps says, oh, we'll hire this guy. He's supposed to hire local. He hired 2 or 3 guys, fired them, and then brought all his people from California up here to do the work. So the local people are getting a little bit sick of the Corps and everybody else sticking it to us. The only reason this does this is because the bottom of the river here, there isn't enough slope when you come out of the canyon, so it will not pool. It will not carve a channel. Every time you get a high water, it'll move. Now up in the canyon, it has managed to if you look at it from up above, it's got pools and things, but from Weyerhaeuser down, it's basically flat, like a delta. So now, I worked in the woods for years and years, and our sediment thing, we would build 3 pools, and it would go from one to the next, and your stuff would settle out, and the river would actually clean itself up. But, I know it ain't your decision and stuff, but all the work they've done up here that we're gonna go look at up on Poland Creek, you do this, raise this first level, and that's all gonna be wiped out.
Up to the next test phase, yes, 7.1 dB.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I don't know how much money the state and everybody's put into these projects up here, and it's just money thrown away. I just wish government entities would start working together and actually figure out something that works instead of, well, this is the cheapest. Do you realize how many millions of dollars were given away when they were dredging the Cowlitz and the Columbia? It was all cost plus. These big outfits, like that one bought like 15 or 20 of them big Manawak drag lines, used 2 of them, and the rest of them sat in a parking lot till they had a job for it. And the government didn't step in and say, hey, this is bull. And I know you don't, you're not into the policies, but it would be nice if now I thought that they changed that a little bit, where now the Corps actually has to do like environmental impact studies, and all that more than they used to.
We have to follow the NEPA process.
Yeah. But it's something to think about. Why are all these volunteers? Basically throwing their time away because a federal entity decides, oh, we got to do this, instead of looking for different. Like I say, there used to be a great run of sockeyes come up the Toutle to Spirit Lake and whatnot. They all disappeared because they could no longer get into Silver Lake because put in that little bin, you know, and sockeyes have to have a lake to spawn in. Well,
We've got someone here to talk about changes above the SRS.
Yeah.
Maybe you could.
well, I'm just saying, I'm a
Are there
little
more
bit
questions
pissed.
for Carl?
Yeah.
Just to try to keep our program.
Oh, I know.
Carl, I was wondering if you could talk about the fish passage here and what's going. So you're doing the sediment raise. My understanding that's coming along with the trap and haul facility upgrades.
Yes.
And that was part of the permitting of the sediment raise. Is that?
That's part of the buy-off opinions when we're going through here. That's the NEPA process. It's for the coho and the Chinook, or the two ESA species. Steelheads. Sorry. Correct. It's the coho and the steelhead that we we've got a jeopardy opinion from NITS, and then we have to put them up home upstream. And that's in the fish collection facility. The idea is to really go in and try to improve it, the efficacy of it, so we can get more, draw more steelhead in, and increase the number of fish that are going above the SRS. Another part of that is Deer Creek is getting a third fish release site. So when they're going up there, they can release the fish in different places.
Is it 90%, right?
Oh, you're talking about the design?
The 90% transport rate of
I
steelhead.
think it was 95.
95? What's the number now? Do you know?
Is that the survival of the
Survival, yeah.
Yeah.
That was they obtained that. We don't know because we're doing some baseline studies because it's 95% of what.
Yeah.
So we just see what's the baseline, and that tells us the effectiveness because those type of facilities, when they're built, they usually take 4 or 5 years after they're built to really run out the case because that's just the way those facilities are. Is you build something and then you think something's working, not working, but that's kind of where.
And a follow-up question with that. I've been trying to kind of figure out how these were permitted and then the impact assessments that you had to do. So you're removing wetland with this raise, correct?
We've been working with the Department of Ecology and stuff to get the permits. We have the water quality permit.
So my understanding, if you remove more than half an acre of wetland, you have to mitigate that somehow with equal value habitat elsewhere. Is that happening?
Well, I don't know the specifics, but we've been working with the appropriate regulatory authorities because essentially what this thing is also emergent wetland, a type of wetland, and also when we raise it, some wetland will be buried in water, but then when it simmers up, they'll re-emerge. And then there's other places where other wetland will re-emerge, so it's a mixture of the two.
So it's not a clean slate. It'll still be emergent wetland. It'll just be at a different stage now where it'll kind of reset.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Carl, are people able to go down to the spillway?
Oh, yes. I'm just thinking any questions, then if you have no questions, we'll take you all the way down
Just
to
a quick
the spillway
question.
itself.
Is this Alder Creek coming in here on
Sorry?
the right?
No,
Is that,
it's
or is
further
that
up.
just a fork of the North Toutle?
That's the a
It's
branch
not
of
pushed
North
all the
Fork.
way. Oh, okay. Just making sure.
If there's no more questions, you can all go all the way down to the actual crest.
Colin, do you have material you want to present here before we go?
Why don't we do it on the way back? Okay, and we'll see how much time we've got.
University of Nottingham student-led, teaching-led research that's been done since 2020 for beaver welfare, so we don't keep them waiting. Yes. Okay, all right, now we've got it. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the sediment clay, Pullen Creek, beaver, salmon and lamprey studies which we've been doing not really so much as part of the annual field trip, but as part of dissertation research and also in collaboration with lots of other people from a variety of federal, state and private outfits. And what would go fastest actually is if I just say next slide and Cheyenne hits the button for the next slide.
Yes, absolutely.
Just press the down button. Yeah, so in 23-24 we did some dissertation research. Next slide. This is the crew. So Matthew Stoddard in the check shirt, Harry Noon in the North Face, and then the other two guys you know, Mark and James Bond. And so the students came out and lived here at the Eco Park and took the basic research under my supervision. We also had some really important inputs from Joe Skaliski from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Lower Columbia Wildlife Office in Vancouver, Washington. And Joe was pivotal to bringing the team up to speed on lamprey and salmon and what they like and what they don't like. Basically what makes fish happy. We also had a chap, Emmett, who's the chap on the left, from the Lower Columbia Community College, and so they supplied somebody too. This wasn't really Emmett's bag, so he didn't hang around too long. So these chaps spent a big chunk of the summer crawling all over the Sediment Plain, Pullen Creek, Hofstede Creek, Bear Creek, a no-name creek down much closer to the Sediment Retention Structure, East Pullen Creek. They combed the area looking for beaver signs, and they found quite a few. So for instance, here's a beaver dam, a pretty small one, out in the middle of the sediment plain. So the beaver are really pushing hard. Next one. Here's a beaver lodge out on an island, out in the middle of the sediment plain. And I was gobsmacked that the beaver would try and set up home and make a living out there, but they are doing that, and we found them. So if we go to the map, and the next slide, this is a map of the area. You see the eco-parcel result is where we're at. The sediment retention structure is where we've just come from. So the next slide shows we found beaver in the wall-based channel adjacent to the engineered log jams, which I was saying, some of these are 180 feet across, some of them a bit smaller, built in 2010 before they became fashionable, and in a pilot project to look at trapping additional sediment on the sediment plain. So the Corps has been looking into this for 14 years already. You can't accuse them of being behind the curve. So we found two wall-based channels. Neither one was currently occupied by beaver, which is why the symbols are open. Next one. We found a really nice beaver dam and colony right down next to the SRS, just across the way there in the no-name creek. Next one. We found three nice active dams in Pullen Creek. One where it comes out the hills and goes into the wetland that has been created by the sedimentation plain backing up sediment into the lower Pullen Creek, and two at the termination of that wetland where it goes out onto the sediment plain. And those are nice dams, they're in good condition. Next one. We found an abandoned dam in the East Fork of Toutle Creek, so again not actually active, no fresh tunes, no fresh repairs, but a nice beaver dam that has been occupied. And then, next slide, the ones I just showed you actually out on the sediment plain. So we have the lodge and the beaver dam next to it, which were not occupied, and the first one I showed you, which was. So there's beaver, as you can see, all over the map here. Next one. And more recently, Cheyenne here has been conducting a temperature study at the engineered log jams and has seen lots of beaver signs and even possible signs of a den or a lodge under one of the islands. So they're starting to colonize those Corps of Engineers log jams as well. Next one. The reason they're able to do that is because if we look at those 14 engineered log jams as they were in July 2017, you see it's mostly sediment. There's some vegetation over on the right-hand side here, This is the wall-based channel running down right at the base of the wall. But in 2017, following the first spillway rise in 2012, the sediment had accumulated so fast that the vegetation really couldn't keep up. Now, since 2017, that rate of aggregation has slowed as the effect of the spillway rise has kind of run out. So if you look at it now in 2023, in an image that WFW got for us, George Florence, as the drone pilot, you can see it's getting a lot greener, especially over here on the edge of the sediment plain where these two structures have just been swallowed into the forest. And here's the wall-based channel. You notice something interesting? It's orange. That's because it's absolutely full of algae. Algae and diatoms are the bottom of the food chain. So having that rich source of food, the little macroinvertebrates, the grazers and the scrapers eat that. The big macroinvertebrates eat the little macroinvertebrates, and the fish just love macroinvertebrates. So we've got a really good food web going here, which is going to help boost the ecology and boost the recovery of the system. And also, of course, those beaver dams trap sand, which is exactly what we want. We want to retain more sediment on the sediment plain, and it's the right size of sediment. It's not boulders or cobbles, it's not silt or clay, it's sand, which is what causes the problems in the localities mostly. Yeah, next one. So my students set up 3 areas. They're doing a comparative study. The first one was in Pullen Creek with those 3 beaver dams. The second one was at the ELJs, the engineered log jams, and the wall-based channel, where we've had engineered log jams for a long time, 14 years. And the third one was out on the sediment plain, where we don't have either of those things. So that's like our control site for what would be there if we didn't have beaver and we didn't have ELJs. Yeah. What they did in a nutshell, because I want to keep it really short, is they looked at what are called HSIs, Habitat Suitability Indices. And they looked at habitat suitability indices in terms of water temperature, flow velocity, water depth, and bed material size. And each of those is scored, and you sum them up, and you get a number between 0, which means that it's lousy, the worst habitat you could ever imagine, and 1, which is salmon and lamprey heavy. So it's going to be somewhere between 0 and 1. And we did this 2 habitat suitability indices, 1 for juvenile coho and coho fry, so the young fish that we hope are going to out-migrate, having spawned up here courtesy of water of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's program for bringing fish past the SRS and mitigation for there not being delivered in passage. We want those little fish to maybe overwinter. And so instead of when they're going to see being 2 centimeters long, they'll be 5 or 8 centimeters long. Their survival chances go up by orders of magnitude if they can stay over the winter and get bigger and fatter and stronger. So that's what we did. The key parameter here, the number 1 key parameter is water temperature. The others are important, but water temperature is really important because if the water's too hot, the salmon will not survive, and they certainly won't stay. So this is our temperature records. Next slide. From last summer, we've got 3 sensors out. The blue one is Pullen Creek. It's hot. In those beaver ponds, there's no shade. The ponds are relatively shallow, lots of insulation. It's hot water, not good for fish, not good for salmon. Good for lamprey, but not for salmon. And the thing there is, these are not good habitat for those fish to live, but they are food factories. They are pumping out primary productivity that drifts down into the other water courses where the salmon can feast on it. So not a great place to live, but a great place for the salmon supermarket producing the food they want. If we look at the grey one, that's the North Fork Toutle itself, cooler, but actually in centigrade here, still getting up above 20 degrees centigrade quite regularly. That's not good for salmon. It's too hot. The wall-based channel is the orange one, 5 degrees cooler. it's spot on. I mean, if you were, trying to get perfect temperature for rearing these young fish, lamprey, and baby coho salmon, that would be it. And that's because it's spring-fed, it's shaded, and it has a much different temperature regime. So this is reflected in the results, and I won't show them all, I'll just cut to the chase. So in terms of coho salmon par, the highest HSI, the most suitable habitat is the wall-based channels and the yellow bay. The least habitable is the Plum Creek Beaver Pond, and then the North Fork Toutle is kind of middle. For the Pacific lamprey, there is a clear winner. They're going to absolutely love the wall-based channel with the jays and Plum Creek, because they're much less temperature dependent. The other two habitats are really not good for lamprey. And while salmon are listed and are kind of the iconic, megafauna that people love and love to catch, lamprey are also a keystone species for the aquatic ecosystem. And they have huge cultural significance for the tribes as well. So getting lamprey back up here will be really, really good. And notwithstanding that the requirement of the trapping hole program is to bring coho salmon and steelhead up, the operators there will also bring up lamprey if they wind up in the facility. And so we found Pacific lamprey and brook lamprey in those beaver ponds doing really well. So to move on then, that's a very quick view of the study. The other thing that happened last year, next slide please, was we ran a short course partnering with Beaver and River Restoration. We had Emily Fairfax from the University of Minnesota, who's a rock star. She's on CBS Morning America talking about beaver and all the good things they do, but also about beaver management and how we're going to, we have to deal with the problems that beaver cause as well as the advantages. We had Alexa Whipple, who runs the Metal Beaver Project, the best beaver reintroduction program on the planet. And we had Chris Jordan from NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service, who's a champion of the riverscape approach to restoration and is a leading expert in building PALs and beaver dialogues. So those three titans came here and taught this short course. And one of the things that we did was we did a beaver suitability study that Emily Fairfax had, where you make a series of observations, just like the HSI, but for beaver, and for the suitability of the site for beaver reintroduction. So when we did that, we had help from the Cowlitz tribe, from Eric White, who was at that time their beaver release specialist, and Eric had flagged up 3 possible beaver release sites he thought looked good. And here they come. So the first one, next slide, was right on Pulling Creek. The second one was in Mark's Pond, which was, I don't want to put beaver in Mark's Pond, do we? But I think Mark's up for it. And the third one was down on the No Name Creek. So Eric had picked out independently where we actually did find the beaver as well. And then something that we didn't plan for happened. Eric left the tribe, and the tribe's beaver holding facility was full of beaver. And so luckily, by a good connection, the Cascade Forest Conservancy, Amanda, who's here today, stepped in and said, okay, we can take care of these beaver and we can get them released, but where are we going to do it? And that's where the Lower Columbia Fish Enhancement Group stepped up again and said, because they'd had people at this short course, said, well, we know there's some good sites because we assessed them. See if Mark would take them on his property, which he did. And so there's been beaver released on the Pulling Creek site. There's been beaver released also into East Pulling Creek. And today, by another, I don't know how to say it, it's kind of calmer. Today is going to be a further beaver release, and you guys get to see it, so I'll stop gathering. Nick, well, we'll see. Personally, I'm not convinced. The beaver are very, very resilient. They're very responsive to impacts. They may move upstream. They may change locations. I don't think they're going to hightail it out here completely. Trees will die, but will they all die? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, we'll find out.
Yeah, so we're gonna head to East Pullen Creek. I think with this many people, it's gonna be easiest to walk there. The beavers should be arriving in 5 minutes in their limo, and then we'll take them down there. So it's gonna take probably 10-15 minutes for you guys to walk, so you could almost get started. You know, obviously some of you are still wrapping up lunch. I think you could wrap that up and then come down, and I'll hop in the car with Katie and we'll get things positioned.
And while you're walking down there, we have one other thing that I don't know if Colin mentioned, because there's been some other things around here, but we also got mixed up with that Lower Columbia Enhancement Group. You know, and I think a few of you were here, and when we walked down the last tour, when I talked you all into coming up and getting your feet wet down on the mud flow, and then that started a lot of this stuff happening. And they saw fish trying to cross the old road down here, the 2500, and on Pullen Creek, where my culvert was collapsed and blocked, and the water was overflowing. And much to my surprise, under a program that I had known nothing about with the state until actually that day, a program called the FFFPP program, this young group of really fine people who want to save the salmon up here in this area turned me on to it. And then, long story short, a sunken culvert that was blocking fish passage in Pullen Creek, which is a very fruitful area, body of water for spawning, was replaced with what you will see today. And they did it in about a year and a couple months, because everybody was here. So when you say things can't get done quickly, it was done lightning speed, unbelievable. But I don't want to tell you about it. We'll just let you see it as you go down there.
So if we can get the if y'all can just give us a little head start with the beavers, because they're going to move slow a little bit. So yeah, it's going to be a little slippery on the trail, so be really careful. I'll lead the way. So yeah,
You got that?
basically just one person on the front, one person on the back on either side. They shift and slide around. You have to move with them. And don't drop them, because they'll be really upset. We need a fourth person here, and then we'll need 4 people on there.
Okay. Becky, don't invite you. Yeah, those ropes might not be adjusted, so try and adjust your hand a little bit if it's not comfortable. You want to keep them about as level as possible. That's great. Good job.
Yeah, keep the back a little higher. You want to keep them a little level. There we go.
I was like, I want to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Very nice.
You guys should stay there. No, you have to stay there.
Wrong way, dude. Pond's the other way.
They
Yay!
You want to give everyone a brief summary of what happened, why we were here, and the work that took place to get us to a brand new beautiful bridge.
Nice. Yeah, welcome everybody. So if you look on the back there, you can see a section of the old culvert that got ripped out. I just wanted to keep a piece of it as a little memento of what was there. Hear the whole story. Basically, you know, it was squashed and undersized for what it was, and so one of the issues that a lot of people don't think about with these culverts is even if it's functionally passing water, which this one wasn't, it was totally sedimented in. A lot of times we put undersized culverts that when water has to go through them, it accelerates and basically creates a velocity barrier where fish can't, you know, swim against that current to get up to upstream habitat. So this had all kinds of issues. It was perched, so it had a drop that fish would have to jump to get into it, and it was sedimented and crushed. Long list of issues. So yeah, we got it approved through the FFPP program, which is an awesome program for streamlining these bridge projects. If you were to hike farther up into the creek, it splits into a multi-threaded channel. Some beautiful, nice, big, mature cedars. It's a gorgeous spot. And so there was concern about that it could, you know, switch around and start carving at the spots for the new footing. So that's why there's more rock than you might normally see on one of these bridges. But super cool project. We did a fish salvage where we put fish barrier nets, and I think we've got a video that we might be able to show you guys briefly. And we e-fished with the electrofisher and removed all the baby salmon and various things that were in here. And for like a 100-foot stretch of creek, we pulled out hundreds of fish. It blew my mind how many were here. And then when they got to the spot, we dug down to the culvert and ripped the old pipe out. There were also over a dozen of these, the giant Pacific salamanders, which is the largest salamander we've got, and it was super cool. We were actually putting them in, we were trying to get them out of the site, so we were putting them in hard hats, trying to get them out. And, but yeah, the whole construction crew were out trying to, you know, spot the giant salamanders. So, but yeah, super fun. And then after that, we, you know, started chatting with our partners with Cascade Forest Conservancy, and I'd taken the beaver class out here, and we're like, we should try to, you know, try to encourage more beavers out here because we were concerned about, not as Amanda pointed out, you know, worrying about risk of gene flow being limited by the SRS. And then we've also we just got approved for a huge beaver project on Bear Creek north of here. So that'll be an 8-mile project, one of the largest beaver restoration projects that I know of in the country. So totally psyched about that. Question?
So for all the fish that are up in this area, did they get trapped at the SRS and then hauled up here? How did they get here?
The salmon that are here? Yeah. Yeah, so this is one of the drop sites for where they'll take adult salmon that they collect at the SRS. They'll drop them off. You know, when there was the culvert here, they'd drop them on the downstream side of the culvert, and then they'd swim down into the ponds down there. But yeah, and then obviously a lot of native fish that some of these tribs are one of the few spots that actually survived the blast. Like Bear Creek had fish that actually lived through all the explosion impacts and stuff. So there's some native fish out here as well, you know, that just resided in the ponds. Yeah.
Are you going to do plantains on down here by the?
Yeah, we'd like to do some willow plantings as well. That was one of the things that we didn't include in the original construction, but definitely want to do some volunteer plantings. Yeah.
How much? I know bridges are expensive. My husband's a forester. How much?
$240,000.
Yeah. So, which, you know, as Mark will talk about, you know, obviously this isn't necessarily connecting to a huge, you know, town or anything like that. Yep. But you know, it provides access to some amazing habitat. You know, it's a great touchstone point for folks like yourself to come out here and learn about it. So the big thing, obviously, with the bridge was creating a functional passage point for fish to get underneath it.
I know what you're all thinking about the bridge, okay? $250,000, you come in and you see this bridge, and it's a bridge to nowhere, okay? I told people I was so excited about this, and they all told me, well, Mark, that bridge goes nowhere. So I came down here and I'm watching the construction, and my daughters happened to be visiting that month, and I got this bright idea. digital recording. So I sent my daughters down here for 14 days pestering this poor man to get all of the pictures and photos of the construction. And for those of you who know Greg Horsley, who also does construction around here and I grew up with, Greg wasn't too keen on the idea the first day. But my daughters worked on him. And by the end of the time, he was waiting in his construction for them to show up. So that was pretty good. But this bridge to nowhere idea bothered me. Because I mean, I came down here and I'm like, my God, you know, it's like, I don't have millions board feet of timber and they're putting this in. So maybe it is a bridge to nowhere. So then I started watching. And I watched seasoned construction men in the logging and industry in the Northwest with care moving and getting that culvert out and releasing the creek and then pausing to save these huge salamanders. When it first started out, it was just this guy running down there putting them in his helmet. Within 5 minutes, everyone working on the project was pointing them out, grabbing them, catching them, and packing them out of the area. Even the guys running the equipment stopped just to do that. So I thought, that was pretty cool. And then I remembered we caught over 280 fish in the trapping up here and relocating those. So it was neat to see that coming together. And then as I saw the construction going in and saw everything coming together like this, I started to learn. We're changing. And while this may look like a bridge to nowhere, it was going to serve as salmon and steelhead for decades and maybe even a century coming up and down Pullen Creek. So as I started seeing guests coming in here and these people today walking over this bridge to access more education in beaver, the sediment plain, and Pullen Creek, I started to think differently. This is no longer a bridge to nowhere. This is the bridge to the future. Future generations will walk over this with their children, their children's children, and they are going to see what we did here. And I think everybody here that worked on that project, especially these young kids here, and I can say young kids because I'm 65 now, they deserve a really big appreciation round of applause, because without them, this would have never happened. And without you, you have to keep it happening. Remember that, because we have to keep these projects alive. And I know Fish and Wildlife and the legislature, it's boring, but that's how we do it, because we will benefit.
And Mark, as a landowner, how long did it take from start to finish?
I say it was like a year, less than a year. It was incredible.
How much did it cost you?
Cost me nothing. Well, a couple cups of coffee.
You can invoice us for that.
Yeah. No, and believe me, so far, no, it didn't cost me anything. And at that, I thought, oh, wow, what a project. And then as a landowner, you think, well, you know, I got a tax rebate for that. But this will be here long when I am dead and gone, which you all hope will be sooner than later. And this thing will be, you know, this will be here. And it's really nice.
On our landowner agreement, do you remember that? How many years have we committed to supporting you in this bridge?
Well, you're going to maintain it forever.
We're here for 10 years minimum.
That's 10 years.
10 years.
That was in the fine print.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on you after that.
Yeah.
It's on you after 10 years, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
I think it's going to be here pretty nice. And the neat thing is there's not restrictions on your property. There's not restriction on your ownership. The only thing that's restriction is you've got to keep the creek running. And that's the key. So not a bridge to nowhere, it's a stream to somewhere. Oh yeah, and that's why we called it the Bridge to the Future. And you'll see that in the chapter of my book, page 44, chapter 10. It'll be really good. And it tells you all about that Bridge to the Future. But we really appreciate that. And I appreciate all you guys coming down here today.
Thanks for having us, Mark. If Amanda mentioned this.
True that it opens up 5 additional miles, stream miles for fish.
I'd have to check with the. Yeah, it's several. It's a number of miles. I can't remember off the top of my head how many, but yeah, and it's really beautiful habitat up there. If any of you guys do have time to do some walking, look for agates. The other thing on the beaver front, I don't know if Amanda mentioned this, but I think that's 23 beavers we've released up here now. So it's pretty cool.
It's good. 23. I had 22.
Okay. Yeah. That's it.
That's it? Oh.